In this lecture, oxygen is an indispensable element of respiratory therapy. Oxygen is a gas that is very familiar to us, but since it is transparent in color and has no taste or smell, we are not usually aware of it. However, it is an essential element for living organisms to carry out their life activities. In this section, I would like to explain the basics of oxygen. Oxygen is a gas that is present in the Earth's atmosphere at a rate of about 21%. The present atmosphere is composed of 78.1% nitrogen, followed by 20.98% oxygen, 0.93% argon, 0.03% carbon dioxide, and the remaining 0.4% of other trace elements. The reason I use the term present atmosphere is that the oxygen and carbon dioxide levels have fluctuated widely. For example, during the Cambrian period, about 500 million years ago, the oxygen concentration was only about 18%, while the carbon dioxide concentration was about 18%. Around the Jurassic period, about 100 million years ago, the oxygen concentration increased to about 24%, while the carbon dioxide concentration decreased to about 6%. Today, the oxygen concentration is about 21% and the carbon dioxide concentration is about 0.03%, making the composition of the atmosphere more amenable to our activities. One of the main characteristics of oxygen is that it is incombustible, which means that it makes things flammable. In order for something to burn, it must be combustible. A certain amount of heat must be applied to the combustible material, and sufficient oxygen must be supplied. Flammables, heat, and oxygen are the three elements of combustion. And as long as the chain of reactions continues in a loop, combustibles will continue to burn. When any one of these elements is lost, the chain is interrupted and combustion is terminated. In particular, oxygen, in greater quantities, promotes the action of making combustible materials more flammable. Because of this characteristic, it is necessary to keep a sufficient distance from fire or other sources of heat when administering oxygen therapy. Another characteristic of oxygen is its ability to oxidize other substances. Oxidation is a reaction in which a substance and oxygen compound to form an oxide. For example, rust occurs on iron because iron and oxygen react to produce iron oxide on the surface of iron. Oxygen is scientifically very active and can react with a wide variety of substances to produce oxides. For example, when it reacts with copper, copper oxide is generated, and when it reacts with magnesium, magnesium oxide is generated. And it is this oxidative reaction with oxygen that actually exposes cells to oxidation in the body as well. In particular, the intensity of oxygen's reaction is sometimes described as oxygen toxicity because of the negative side effects it produces on cells. When cells are oxidized due to the effects of oxygen toxicity, it is said to cause various diseases such as atherosclerosis and cancer. It is also known to be a factor that accelerates aging. However, as will be explained later, oxygen is an essential element for living organisms to carry out their vital activities. If it is toxic and has a negative effect on cells, don't you wonder what can be done about it? But don't worry about this. The body normally produces substances that prevent oxidation, called antioxidants. In this way, cells are protected from oxidation by oxygen. It is truly a barrier that protects cells from the attack of oxygen. However, this antioxidant barrier is also breached by oxygen at high oxygen concentrations, resulting in cellular injury. Generally speaking, the standard for oxygen therapy is 48 hours at 50%, 12 hours at 80%, and 6 hours at 100% for cells to withstand the effects of oxygen in a reversible way. In medical treatment, oxygen is often adjusted with the goal of reducing the concentration below 60% within 24 hours. The negative aspects have continued, but even so, oxygen is a necessary element. In this slide, I would like to talk about what role it actually plays in our bodies. Oxygen taken into the body through respiration is used in the mitochondria to produce energy from nutrients. The energy produced during this process is used to sustain vital activities. Energy produced in mitochondria is needed to move muscles, to digest and absorb food, and to maintain body temperature. However, when oxygen is lost, energy cannot be produced, no matter how much nutrition is available. This makes it impossible to move muscles, digest and absorb food, and maintain body temperature, all of which were previously possible. This makes it difficult to sustain life. By the way, when mitochondria produce energy from nutrients and oxygen, carbon dioxide is produced. It is just like the exhaust gases produced when gasoline is burned in the engine of a car. And if too much carbon dioxide stays in the body, it can cause a variety of problems. Therefore, the body needs to release carbon dioxide. We breathe to take in oxygen that the body needs and discard carbon dioxide that the body does not need. This work of breathing consists of three processes. One is ventilation, which is the movement of air in and out. Second is blood flow, which transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide to cells throughout the body. And third is diffusion, which delivery of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the lungs and blood. When any one of these three processes fails, the condition is called respiratory failure, and the treatment for respiratory failure is respiratory therapy. Finally, I will summarize the basics of oxygen by giving you a definition of respiratory failure. Normally, oxygen in arterial blood PaO2 is present at about 100 mm of mercury. But respiratory failure is defined as a condition in which the oxygen in arterial blood PaO2 drops to about 60 mm of mercury or less. As I mentioned earlier, respiratory failure is caused by a failure of one or a combination of one of the three components of respiration. This lack of oxygen in the arterial blood is called hypoxemia. Furthermore, respiratory failure due to hypoxemia can be classified into two types, type 1 and type 2. I will discuss hypoxemia in more detail in the next section.